Right, time to get moving once again, and for some reason I decided to head to the Chaos Shrine. Granted, eventually we're gonna have to go back there for the main story, but this is a little early for that. And it's not like this is Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, where you can just possibly skip over a large chunk of the story in order to get to the final boss in a hurry. Even if this is not a very narrative-driven game, there are still story beats for us to absolutely have to go through before we start working our way to the final encounter, and considering just how brutal things will get when we finally get to the final dungeon, we're certainly going to be thankful for the roadblocks that prevented us from getting there all too soon. I'm sure that distortion is going to play some role in why we can't just casually walk into the further depths of the shrine just yet, though I suppose there are still some rooms on the first floor that the Mystic Key could unlock. I doubt we'll find anything especially great in here. We already found the key item we need to advance the next set of areas with the nitro powder. I just have to get to the place where I actually use it. Still, I suppose there's no harm in checking the Chaos Shrine's first floor for a bit. It's not like any of the monsters we could run into here are going to be anything to really fear. And that's always a bit of an awkward thing for me in various role-player games. I like being able to say that I was able to beat the enemy because of my skills, especially when we returned to an area that gave me trouble before. But no, in a vast majority of role players, especially the turn-based ones, the higher your level, the more you can just brute force your way through previously difficult obstacles. Really kind of annoying in a way, but I suppose this style of progression, where your base stats keep rising, is one of the easiest kinds of progression systems to pull off. Funnily enough, Final Fantasy II, the immediate sequel to this one, tried to change up how your characters got stronger, and that style of doing things kind of fell apart on itself. To be honest, I've never really given the second game as fair a chance as I probably should have in the past. There were always other games on my to-do list, so I never felt the need to force myself through something that a lot of people complained about. Maybe when I finally get around to trying the Pixel remaster of it, I'll have better feelings for it than many other people who've reviewed it over the years. But we've got a long ways to go before we get around to working on that game. At the very least, we gotta finish this one, and I'm sure I'm gonna want to do a game between the Final Fantasy series. Yeah, I probably should just get back to fast-forwarding for a while here. It's not like the monsters we're running into in this shrine are really going to be worth all that much. In terms of both money and experience, they just don't have anything for us at this point. And it's a little funny that this is the same dungeon that managed to take out half of our team in random encounters early on. The monsters in here are genuinely capable of being hero killers, but it's hard to remember that after a while of fighting and leveling up across the game. Hell, it's something that's a bit of an issue I have with a lot of role players, turn-based and otherwise. I like the sense of us getting stronger and more skilled over the course of the game, maybe expanding on the tricks we're able to pull off as things go onwards. Hell, I've been trying to record Final Fantasy Stranger of Paradise while working on this game, partly because the Dark Souls style of combat put into a Final Fantasy world feels pretty damn good. The only things slowing me down from just completely getting drawn into that are the iffy PC port of the game, having some odd lag for a single-player game that my computer's drivers should be able to handle, and the fact that it takes a long time for the story to actually get genuinely as interesting in it. Well, the gargoyles are definitely several steps up from all the other enemies we've been fighting around here, but still not exactly enough to push us at this point. And with that, we're done with our little trip through the Chaos Shrine. The next time we come, I'm sure we'll be at the tail end of the game when we're gonna try to finish things off. Again, Really hoping that we run into some fresh-looking monsters when we get to the next major area. Not that I expect those enemies to really act all that differently from the goblins, ogres, slimes, and wolves that we've been running into. Yeah, I suppose with the random way the game allows the various characters to strike, it's possible that they might land some blows that are going to be awkward, like inflicting poison or paralysis, but otherwise, yeah. Outside of bosses, we are probably not going to have too much trouble from here on. Back in the water again! At least we see different sprites for the enemies there. Kinda funny that in turn-based games, I'm more of a fan of games throwing in palette swaps of various enemies, or when enemy types don't really have much of a difference to one another outside of one hitting harder and being able to take more of a beating than the previous iteration. If anything, my issue in this game with some of the palette swaps has been the fact that we run into the next version while still fighting the previous iteration. You can literally end up fighting against 3 different kinds of wolves in the same encounter in this game. Regular wolves are, of course, the easiest. Wargs are tougher, and werewolves are the toughest. But that kind of encounter just highlights that the palette swaps are pretty empty attempts to make the same kind of enemy a little tougher. Seriously, why send an ogre chief at us in the same fight as an ogre, instead of fully graduating us to just fighting against the ogre chiefs? If the game feels confident enough to send more powerful grunts at us, it just doesn't feel right that we're still dealing with the weaker ones. I'm not sure how much of that particular complaint is due to me not really understanding the genre well enough, and how much is just the fact that this is the absolute first example of this style of game, and we won't see it in other games that I do in this genre. Either way, it felt like something worth mentioning. Right, guess we're going into the ruined castle as well to see if there's anything worth grabbing in here. Okay, wasn't expecting any random encounters in here at the very least. Guess that's what happens when we barge into a locked room. Mildly annoying that Boromir can't move right now, but it's more concerning that Tyson's been taking so much damage per hit. I probably should have used a cure spell instead of throwing a potion at him. Hell, why am I still being this conservative with our magic charges in the PSP version of the game? Is it just out of sheer habit, since every other version of Final Fantasy I, I tend to be pretty cautious with spending magic because of just how few charges you've got? It's not like we're worried about running into a boss anytime soon here, so I should be more free with it. Maybe it's just the fact that with magic you can't fully calculate how much health you're gonna gain back with any accuracy unless you strictly remember the magic power of the character you have casting it, which will of course change with each level up. Whereas with items, you know exactly how much you're going to regain with each shot. I'm sorry, if a punch manages to put someone to sleep, shouldn't that count as being knocked out? I mean, sure, knocked out means you're out of health points. Sleep is a status effect that doesn't give a damn how injured or unhurt you are. It's just one of those little moments where game logic and real-life logic just doesn't really mesh well for me. Okay, that does it for all the items in this castle. Getting pretty close to Tyson outgrowing the iron nunchucks. Are there gonna be any variants of nunchucks after iron, or is it just gonna be nothing but his bare hands for the rest of the game? Whereas we have some swords for Boromir that are specifically primed to deal with extremely specific enemies in the game. And I don't think there's a means to switch blades in the middle of a fight. We've got a few odd little gimmicks for some of the character classes around here. And I look forward to seeing if that's going to be the case for some of the later games. I certainly don't recall too many class-specific gimmicks in Final Fantasies 7, 8, or 12. But then there wasn't really all that much to differentiate the characters in those games either. Not to say that absolutely everybody functioned exactly the same, period. Just that those differences were relatively minuscule in those games compared to here. Seriously, how many spells and bits of equipment are class-specific? How many times does one class just work so completely different from absolutely everybody else to make them all feel extremely distinct? For example, Wesker is a lot better at crowd control than anyone else unless there's undead around. Then Morn can get in on the multi-target spells, whereas Boromir and Tyson are only hitting one guy, but each guy takes a lot of damage. Shame I don't use the multi-target stuff more consistently, considering how many fights start where we have to deal with a small swarm. Maybe it's hard for me to really consider any number of enemies to be overwhelming for us around here. Again, I'm pretty used to a lot of war-style games, and if I'm facing off against less than a dozen foes, then it's hard to really imagine a group of 4 characters being outright overwhelmed by their sheer numbers, and it doesn't help that quite a few of these guys, at least one of our members, can just take out in a single hit. I'd probably have to wait until we get to the 3D part of the franchise, or just go to a completely different franchise altogether, to see anything that has the kind of frantic, balls-to-the-wall desperation as something like Helm's Deep. The two-dimensional games just wouldn't have a chance to make armies of that kind of scale look even remotely good given the engine limitations. If they want to make you feel pushed, they're gonna make a single monster extremely troublesome. Not that I feel that the franchise really needs something like Helm's Deep to be fun. My brain just went in that direction because we've been fighting so many bloody monsters, going from point to point, that if I bothered to keep track of our kills, we'd probably get at an extremely obscene number at this point. I kinda wish we could just get off the boat at any damn bit of land, but I suppose that's asking for too much. And great, now part of me feels that Random Lake is gonna be important later on. It's not like the game would have a bunch of notable landmarks that don't really mean anything, so, that's really just catching my eye. With my lackluster ability to mentally map things out, I probably wouldn't be able to find it again later unless I outright pulled out a guide from a random website that was made a good deal after the initial release of this game. And clearly, I need a map right now since I went in a direction that just led me in a circle. Bloody hell, I am probably going to be doing quite a bit of grinding in this clip, aren't I? That's certainly not my intention, but still, it looks like I'm gonna save and end the clip before we get to the next major location, so there was a lot of, wandering here, even if it wasn't fully aimless. Really wish there was something that told me where we needed to go instead of me just blindly feeling around or trying to go off of very long memories. It's kind of funny that before I've even gotten to the first crystal dealt with, I'm already regretting choosing to do the PSP version over the Pixel Remaster just for some user interface elements. Ah well, we're 11 clips in, we're little committed to this version of the game. Okay, I'm not seeing any obvious places we're supposed to go to, and I distinctly recall we're supposed to enter a cave on the side of a mountain range. Hold on, if I'm not going to stumble into it myself, I definitely need to open a guide for this. Ah, there we are. This is as good a place as any to get a bit of rest before moving on.